Gordon, author of the book The Spirit of Attack. It's now February 2023, and the recent shoot down of a Chinese balloon that came in over Alaska and went across the United States and finally was shot down off the east coast of the U.S. reminds me of some incidents with balloons some 60 years ago when I was flying in Alaska. Flying in Alaska. Those were the happiest flying days of my life. I took this photo of my wingman's F-102 as we were flying from Elmendorf out to Galena and going past Mount McKinley. We were based at Elmendorf and would fly out to Galena in the west, King Salmon in the southwest, and Eielson in the north, where we had fighter strips, and we would get scrambled from there against unknown aircraft. I got about 9 scrambles against unknown aircraft, and a couple of times there were Russians I was going after. One day I was doing a practice intercept against one of our T-33 targets. He was flying very low down the Yukon River. He was so low that he was actually leaving a wake in the water. Now that's a low target. But as I was going after him, I happened to look up and I saw a star. A star in the daytime? No way. I broke off the intercept, lit my afterburner, and started climbing. I called the controller on the ground, the radar controller, and said I was going after an unidentified flying object. That got their attention. I stayed in afterburner and got to my highest altitude of about 40,000 feet, and then I could see that the star was really a balloon with a gondola hanging underneath it. I was describing the balloon and the gondola to the ground controller when suddenly the balloon popped. A large strip of material came off of the balloon and was flying in the breeze. The balloon deflated and began to fall. Then the gondola detached from the balloon and began to fall by itself, and then a little drogue chute popped out of the gondola, and it fell for a while, and then a larger parachute popped out of the gondola. Now the gondola had been falling with or without a parachute for about 10 minutes, and it was still far, far above me. I called the controller and told him I was bingo fuel, running out of fuel, and I had to go home. He had already called a C-130 transport at lower altitude and vectored it over, and the C-130 could see the gondola and the parachute. No, I didn't take this picture. This is a picture of a NASA balloon, but it shows you about what I was looking at. The C-130 followed the gondola and parachute until it landed in the Alaska tundra. Some helicopters came out from Eielson Air Force Base and picked up the gondola. I asked where it had come from, and they said it had been launched from France. I don't believe it was a French balloon. It may have been launched from somewhere in Europe, but I think it was one of our balloons that went all the way across the Soviet Union, sampling the air after one of their nuclear tests. And it was being recovered near Fairbanks, where the Alaska tundra made a good, safe place for it to land and be recovered. A few months later, we were briefed on another balloon incident. A balloon had come across the Bering Sea and crossed over Alaska. It was at medium altitude where we could fly around and look at it, we thought about shooting it down, but we didn't have any guns. We only had missiles. One of our sergeants had a brilliant idea. One of our T-33 targets had a tow reel installed on it, which had a thin wire that would play out with an electric motor to pull targets that the Army sometimes would shoot at. We took the target off and got an anchor from one of the small boats that we used for fishing. We sharpened the flukes of the anchor until it was sort of like a treble fishhook. Attached it to the wire from the T-33, and the T-33 took off and flew to the balloon. The T-33 let out the anchor on the long, thin cable, then flew low over the balloon, snagged the balloon popped and came down. The thin cable snapped, so the T-33 was able to return to base and land safely. They didn't tell us where that balloon had come from. Since I started making this video, 2 more balloons have been shot down, one over Alaskan waters and one over Canada. It shows that there are a lot of balloons out there, or objects they call them, and we need to bring them down in places where we can recover the instrument packages and find out where these balloons or objects are coming from.